Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And it's the middle of the first week of September already. It's September 3rd. It's a Wednesday. Great to be with you on a Wednesday and every day here at EWTN's Catholic Connection, coming to you live from Bella Italia, from central Italy, only a short drive from Assisi. And I talked to our friends who live in Assisi full-time, originally from California, but they sold everything, packed it up, and when they retired, they said, we want to be closer to St. Francis. So they've been there for, I think, 7 years now. Anyhow, I heard from them, and they told me it has been so busy, and there's so much excitement in Assisi because, of course, of the canonization of Carlo Acutis, who's actually buried in Assisi. And that's a place where people are either going before or most likely after the canonization on Sunday. So we'll be covering that, and EWTN has some great opportunities for you to see that live. So if you go to Catholic News Agency today, there's a complete report, also on Church Pop, I believe, on how to watch the canonizations this Sunday of both Carlo Acutis and Pier Giorgio Frassati. It will be the first canonization mass that the Pope will be presiding over, so that's going to be pretty exciting as well, and it is going to be packed. They're saying tens of thousands expected. We don't have a complete number yet, but hopefully Joan will be filling us in on that. So that's what's coming up, and that's what's happening this week, actually, in Italy. And don't forget EWTN.com for all the information. Today is the feast of the memorial of St. Gregory the Great, Pope and Doctor of the Church. Pray for us. We have a wonderful lineup for you this morning on a Wednesday morning. We have Dr. Tom Neal, who is the Chief of Evangelization and Mission Advancement of the Diocese of Pensacola-Tallahassee in the great Sunshine State of Florida, where he's going to be discussing the diocese promulgating the hopeful mysteries of the Rosary. This is really beautiful. Of course, their bishop was involved in that and giving it approval. We'll talk about that. And then, of course, Shrines and Wonders Wednesday. I want to take you back to Assisi, to St. Mary Major Church, a little bit more information about why Carlo wanted to be buried in that spot. We'll also talk about the place where Pier Giorgio Frassati is buried, the cathedral there, the Cathedral of Turin, St. John the Baptist Church. And then speaking of Italy, wrapping up with our dear sister Joan Lewis, Vatican News and Joan's Rome, of course. However, I know she is on a train trying to get back to her apartment so she can talk to us in a quiet place. So hopefully she will join us live. If not, we can reconnect with her next week. But I really hope she can join us live, as there are so many questions for her, given the crowds in Rome, the crowds in Italy in general, and just overall what's happening because of the canonization. I was on Annunciation Radio, as I am every Tuesday morning yesterday, and I told them about the airport. When we landed on Sunday in Fiumicino, the main airport for getting to Rome, basically all over Italy, it's your main spot, packed. I have never seen it that crowded in all the years that we've been going in and out, leading pilgrimages, coming back here. It was crazy busy. So if you are heading over for the canonization, pack extra patience and offer any slowdowns up to the Lord. Put it at the foot of the cross. All right. So as I mentioned, we have a wonderful lineup for you, and I do want to say thanks to Vanessa Den Hagarmo for filling in for me. I hope you had a great Labor Day weekend, everyone. We had a great time at the radio conference last week. It was a lot of fun to see old friends and make some new friends, and to see all the affiliates and how so many of them are growing and rely on our programming. It was just a really encouraging week for all of us, especially those of us who are on the air. It was a blast to do a panel with Matt Swaim and Anna Mitchell. That was really fun, and Ace McKay from EWTN. And I know a lot of the affiliates enjoyed that. So it was a great week, and I do hope that everything went well. Also, I saw some of the coverage online for the family celebration. It looked wonderful, and there's a really great report on Catholic News Agency and also, I believe, on the Register, all about what happened at the wonderful family celebration. And the talks are all recorded, so you can check that out online as well at EWTN.com. We'll say quickly we have to do the weather because we're already running a little bit late. Let's take a look and see what's happening weather-wise. Hot temps in the west, heavy rainfall and flooding potential in the southwest. Hot to extremely hot temps are in place across coastal Southern California again today, and the interior northwest into Thursday, with the Pacific Northwest carrying the potential for record-breaking high temps. A combination of monsoon-type moisture And tropical moisture ahead of Tropical Cyclone Lorena will bring heavy rain and potential for flooding throughout the week. So keep that in mind if you're in the impacted areas. Right now, almost 5 minutes past the hour on a busy Wednesday morning. Thanks for tuning in to EWTN Radio. Let's get started with the news on a Wednesday. More than 1,400 people have been killed in Sunday's earthquake in Afghanistan. Reporter Keir Simmons tells us at least 3,200 people as well are reported to be injured. And the figure has been rising as rescuers contend with rugged terrain in the country's mountainous east.
Some of the villages that were impacted by the quake are incredibly remote, and then the earthquake itself has blocked roads. So rescuers have been struggling simply to get to people.
Officials with the Afghan Red Crescent Society say they fear more people are trapped beneath rubble. The ruling Taliban has put out a call for international aid. Pope Leo expressing his condolences for the over 1,000 people who have been killed in Sudan's western Darfur region. This, as Devin Watkins reports, after heavy rains there caused a landslide that destroyed an entire village. We'll have that report for you a little bit later on. Vice President Vance is set to visit Minneapolis this morning, the shooting last week at Annunciation Catholic School, to pay his respects there. He'll be joined by Second Lady Usha Vance as they hold a series of private meetings to convey condolences to the families of those impacted by the tragedy. The number of those injured in the shooting now standing at 18 children and 3 adults, while 2 children were killed. Mark Mayfield tells us that the Orange County Sheriff's Department in California announcing now the arrest of an armed man accused of threatening a Catholic monastery.
Joshua Richardson from Alabama was arrested on August 26th after showing up at St. Michael's Abbey in Silverado Canyon. Investigators say he started by sending threatening emails, then made more threats in person. Richardson was allegedly in possession of high-capacity magazines, body armor, brass knuckles, and knives. Investigators believe he drove to Orange County from his home in Alabama. I'm Mark Mayfield.
And we now have that report on Pope Leo expressing his condolences to the over 1,000 people who have been killed in Sudan's western Darfur region.
A landslide wiped out Teresa, a village in Sudan's Darfur region, on August 31st, following several days of heavy rainfall. At least 1,000 people were killed in the village in the Mara Mountains area, according to the Sudan Liberation Movement Army. The movement appealed to international aid organizations and the United Nations on Monday for help recovering the bodies of victims. In their statement, the Sudan Liberation Movement, which controls the area located in the Darfur region but has not taken sides in the civil conflict, said the entire village has been completely leveled to the ground. Initial information indicates the death of all village residents, read the statement, estimated to be more than 1,000 people. Only one person survived, it added. The ruling Sovereign Council in Khartoum mourned the deaths of the innocent residents of Tarasin, saying it has mobilized rescue forces to assist in the area. Sudan's civil conflict has raged for over 2 years after the tensions between the country's military and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces exploded. The United Nations and other aid groups have not been able to access many areas in the Darfur region due to the fighting, including villages in the Mara Mountains. Doctors Without Borders, a medical charity, previously warned that the area represents a black hole in the humanitarian response in Sudan. The Mara Mountains are a rugged volcanic chain that runs for 160 kilometers to the southwest of El Fasher, a flashpoint in the conflict. Many displaced families have fled El Fasher for the relative safety of the mountainous region. Over 40,000 people have reportedly been killed and 14 million others displaced due to Sudan's civil conflict, with famine and disease running rampant in the war-torn Darfur region. I'm Devin Watkins.
A recent study finding that the rate of mental health-related hospitalizations doubled for women who had abortions compared with women who gave birth. This study is published in Catholic News Agency today, by the way, and it was actually released earlier this summer in the Journal of Psychiatric Research, and it compared abortions with other pregnancies in hospitals in Quebec, Canada, between the years of 2006 and 2022, tracking information on women for up to 17 years. The study, which compared more than 1.2 million women, CNA reports, who gave birth in Quebec hospitals with more than 28,000 women who had abortions, found that rates of mental health-related hospitalizations were higher following induced abortions than other pregnancies. Now, the study also finding that abortion was associated with a number of mental health-related difficulties, including hospitalization for psychiatric disorders, substance abuse, and suicide attempts as well. In other news, the president is vowing to send the National Guard to the city of Chicago.
Well, we're going in. I didn't say when. We're going in. When you lose, look, I have an obligation. This isn't a political thing. I have an obligation.
Yesterday, the president also repeatedly said that Governor Pritzker should call him and that he would be happy to help fight crime there. His comments following a violent Labor Day weekend in Chicago, which saw at least 58 people shot, 8 of them were killed. And the mayor of Washington, D.C. is ordering the city to coordinate with federal law enforcement. Yesterday, Mayor Muriel Bowser issuing an executive order requiring indefinite coordination with federal officials amid the Trump administration's crackdown in the city. She issued a statement saying the order will provide the pathway forward beyond the presidential emergency. The Trump administration's federalization of the city's police force does expire next week. Brian Shook tells us Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the U.S. has conducted a lethal strike on a drug vessel in the Southern Caribbean.
In a post on X, Rubio said the drug vessel had departed from Venezuela and was being operated by a designated narco-terrorist organization. His post came just moments after President Trump had referenced the strike while speaking in the Oval Office. Trump said there were a lot of drugs on the boat. This comes after the U.S. deployed warships near Venezuela. I'm Brian Shook.
A U.S. district judge saying the deployment of National Guard troops to Los Angeles violated federal law. The president did deploy the troops in response to protests against his immigration operations in the city. The judge said while individuals engaged in violence during the protests, there was no rebellion, nor was civilian law enforcement unable to respond to the protests and enforce the law. The judge's ruling now bars the use of troops in California to execute the laws. However, the ruling is paused pending some further legal action that's expected. And Russian spy planes are being spotted more often near Alaska, catching the eye of the military. Congressman Tony Gonzalez saw it firsthand during a recent visit.
The week I was there, it was a Wednesday, and they had already done 4 intrusions, which is higher than normal.
The San Antonio Republicans saying that each time fighter jets were scrambled to monitor the potential spy planes, NORAD said in a statement the Russian aircraft never entered U.S. or Canadian sovereign territory. Instead, they were in an international zone off Alaska. And the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee is making public the first batch of documents related to the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein.
Epstein and his accomplices stole their innocence, stole their very lives in some cases, stole their hopes and dreams and aspirations, and ruined them in so many ways.
House Speaker Mike Johnson speaking to reporters yesterday after the committee met with victims in the case. The committee says it received the files from the DOJ in response to a subpoena for documents related to Epstein. The over 33,000 pages of material provided to the panel were released across multiple files and folders on Google Drive and Dropbox. House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer subpoenaed the DOJ last month. And a federal judge is allowing Google to keep its Chrome browser, as Ira Spitzer explains.
U.S. District Judge Amit Mehta's decision in Washington follows his ruling last year that Google illegally monopolized the search market for more than a decade.
That's reporter Ira Spritza, who says the ruling stems from a landmark case filed 5 years ago where the Department of Justice alleged that Google kept its share of the general search market by creating strong barriers to entry and a feedback loop that sustained its dominance. That's the latest news. More Catholic Connection coming your way on a Wednesday morning. It's September 3rd. A beautiful Wednesday. Here we are already in the month of September, a very exciting time for the church, especially moving toward the canonizations of Carlo Acutis and Pier Giorgio Frassati this weekend. Don't forget, we will be there, EWTN, great live coverage all weekend long. all week long, all kinds of programming. Doug Keck will be on with me on Friday to discuss more in detail. Right now, though, we're going to talk about Mama Mary, our Blessed Mother, and the beautiful Rosary. On the phone with us is Dr. Tom Neal. He is the Chief of Evangelization and Mission Advancement at the Diocese of Pensacola-Tallahassee. And Dr. Tom, great to catch up with you and to hear about the hopeful mysteries of the Rosary. This is exciting. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
It is. It's a pleasure to be here, Teresa. Thanks for having me.
All right, so how did these mysteries come about? And I know it's all been approved by the bishops. This is a pretty exciting announcement, but when did this all start?
That's a great question. So in 2017, I was teaching as a professor at Notre Dame Seminary in New Orleans, and I had lived previously in Tallahassee, Florida, years before that, and there was a group of us men who were friends, myself, Bruce Conroy, Peter Bond, and then Father Chris Winklejohn is a priest at the Diocese of Pensacola-Tallahassee. And in 2017, Bruce had shared with us an idea. We all have a love for Our Lady, for the Rosary, and he said, Pope John Paul II in 2002 introduced the luminous mysteries to kind of fill in that last gap in the New Testament for us to meditate on the entire life of Christ, from his conception all the way to the final end in the coronation. And so he said, I've fallen in love with this kind of view of the Old Testament that Jeff Cavins and these beautiful kind of digging into the story of salvation has opened up. And I can see that Christ is present throughout the entire Old Testament story from the beginning to the end. And so how can we meditate on the mystery of Christ as he's present in that long story unfolding from creation until Mary's Annunciation? Is it possible to imagine a rosary where we can do that? And so this began, this conversation from 2017 until 2023, praying, reflecting, writing back and forth regularly. And then in 2023, I left the seminary to move to Pensacola and was hired by the bishop, here, Bishop William Bach, to be the chief of evangelization here, and shared the idea with him. And he was immediately captivated by the idea. And so we began the journey there from 2023 all the way to December 8th, 2024, when Bishop Wack promulgated these mysteries of hope for our diocese, not for the Universal Church, of course, but for our diocese as worthy of devotion. So that's a very simple kind of journey. There's a lot of things that happen in that period of time, but that's the origin.
So what are the hopeful mysteries?
Yep, that's a great question. So the hopeful mysteries, of course, 5 for the 5 decades here, they take us through 4 major covenant events in the Old Testament that are the kind of, you might say, the defining hinge events in the Old Testament leading up to the coming of Christ. They would be the creation of man and woman in God's image, the fall, and then the promise of the first gospel, the proto-evangelium it's called, that first promise of salvation that's given to Adam and Eve after their sin. That's the first mystery. So it's the creation, the fall, and the redemption that begins. The second one is the story of the flood, Noah's Ark, God remembering Noah and the promise of salvation and the sign of the rainbow being given as a universal covenant for the whole human race, the beginning of a new creation. The third one is the sacrifice of Isaac by Abraham, also called the binding of Isaac, which in the New Testament is profoundly seen as a type of Christ himself and his sacrificial offering as the lamb. So you have that where the covenant given to Abraham now is ratified by his willingness to return his son back to God, the gift given to him to give back to God as gift, and that covenant now is extended to bless all nations. So that's the third. And then the fourth is the Passover, Exodus, the travel to Mount Sinai, and the giving of the covenant on Sinai, which is the fourth defining one. And then the fifth one, which is the most magnificent, like the crown of these mysteries for me, which when Bruce first shared his inspiration, which I'm absolutely convinced as the bishop and so many others was a gift from the Holy Spirit, was the Immaculate Conception of the Mother of God, which is, you might say, that the crowning moment when the whole history of salvation, the choice of God of a people, the Jewish people, to bear the covenant comes to completion in the conception of the daughter of Zion, of daughter of Eve, of Mary, redeemed to the core of her being by her son who is not yet conceived. And this fulfills the Davidic promise, right, that she is redeemed by the son of David himself. So it's a kind of a beautiful capstone. And so it takes us to the conception of Mary. And And then you go from the conception of Mary to the first joyful mystery, which is the conception of Jesus in the womb of Mary. So it creates this magnificent thread from creation all the way through, and then to the last joyful, glorious mystery, to the coronation. So you have now a thread of salvation the Rosary can take you from beginning to end.
We're talking with Dr. Tom Neal, Chief of Evangelization and Mission Advancement at the Diocese of Pensacola-Tallahassee, about the hopeful mysteries of the Rosary, which were approved by the bishop for that diocese. Now, you have on your website a beautiful video related to this, and people can go to ptdiocese.org/the hopeful mysteries of the Rosary. Now, I love those little, rosary pamphlets that I keep one in my rosary bag, just because sometimes I may be too tired to remember the particular rosaries of the day. Are you issuing any type of materials for the people in your diocese?
That's a great question. We are. So one of the men I mentioned in this group, Peter Bond, who's part of this journey, owns a Catholic prayer cards company. CatholicPrayerCards.org is what it is on the web, and he and us, we all together, along with the bishop, produced a devotional pamphlet that goes along with it that has sacred images from traditional artwork, has brief meditations on each mystery, and then has scripture passages that are key to meditating on each of those 5 mysteries. And it has in the back the bishop's imprimatur and Neal and the time of promulgation and such. So that's available if you go on CatholicPrayerCards.org and put in Hopeful Mysteries. It'll pull up the pamphlets. You can purchase those. They're bilingual. You have to translate it into Spanish, which our bishop himself helped to translate bilingual. And they have sold tremendous numbers of them, which is remarkable how much they've spread. Oh my gosh. I've done interviews over in Ireland, different parts of the country, et cetera. I mean, it's really beautiful to see how it's spread. But the artwork really particularly is magnificent if you could see each one of them. And the most unique one, I think, is this beautiful, it's from a piece of artwork by Giotto in the 13th century of Joachim and Anne at the gate in the temple where they meet in the story, that second century story, where the angel announces to them that they are to no longer be like Abraham and Sarah in their old age, sterile, but give birth, and they come together. And then after they come together, so the image is of Joachim and Anne kissing at the gate, which the text in the second century describes them coming together. The beautiful.
It's beautiful. You have that in your video. Yeah, the video is lovely too. They did a great job on the video. What's so neat about this, Doctor, is that even though this is for your diocese, approved by your bishop, so not for the entire Universal Church, you said there are many people, once they heard about them, who are very interested in also praying these mysteries.
There are. Yeah, I mean, there are. I mean, all over the place. And we've gotten, testimonials back from people of just the gift this has brought, particularly the gift of hope, right? These are called the hopeful mysteries.
Right.
We got that from the fourth Eucharistic prayer, which says, and through the prophets, you taught us to hope for salvation, right? This is the whole Old Testament, the teaching of hope. And so during the year of hope, which is we didn't even know that it was promulgated, by the way. We didn't realize the correspondence between the year of hope and the hopeful mysteries. But this has been a sense. There have been convents around the country that have ordered this to just lay people all over the place, bilingually prayed throughout the diocese. The Hispanic community has really embraced it in this diocese. It's very powerful. And, all of us describe just the depth of insight that brings us into sacred scripture in the Old Testament that we wouldn't have if we didn't have this way to pray with it.
Right. But, who knows? I mean, I'm sure have you sent it to the Pope or to the Vatican? Because who knows, they might approve this for the entire church.
Yes, we've shared that with our bishop. If he wants to wait till his ad limina visit to Rome, or if he would like to send it in advance. So maybe he could send it to Rome during this year before the Holy Year is over. I think we would love that. Because we would love for this to be right for the Universal Church. I mean, that's the way these things grow, right? Oftentimes piety begins locally and then grows organically as the Holy Spirit.
This is great.
So that's how we feel. We're very, very privileged to be part of this. I'll tell you, I feel like honored to be part of this.
Well, thanks for sharing this. Okay, give us the website again before we have about 30 seconds where we can get the pamphlets and the cards.
Yeah, absolutely. CatholicPrayerCards.org. They can buy the pamphlet. It also has information on there. And then if you go to ptdiocese.org and put in Hopeful Mysteries, you'll find videos explaining the background of the history, theology.
Thanks, Tom. We'll be right back. Welcome back. It is is a Wednesday, which means it's Shrines and Wonders Wednesday, based on my book, Italy's Shrines and Wonders, from EWTN Publishing, which, by the way, I just found out recently that it is now officially a Catholic bestseller. So I do hope you grab a copy of it. It's such a helpful guide for Italy. The pictures are amazing. EWTN Publishing just went above and beyond with this book. I was so thrilled with it when it came out earlier this year. And it has so much information, but so many great stories about life in Italy, and especially about our saints, including soon-to-be Saint Carlo Acutis and Saint Pier Giorgio Frassati. All right, so these two young men, one who was born in, of course, who died actually in 1925, and that would be Pier Giorgio Frassati. And then we have what's known as the millennial saint, who is known as the millennial saint, and that would be Carlo Acutis. And yet they're so similar in so many ways, even though they're about 100 years apart. Well, they're both from northern Italy. At least Carlo was raised in Milan. I believe he was born in London and raised in Milan. And, of course, Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati is from Torino, or Turin, Italy. And he is buried at the cathedral there. We'll take you there in a minute. But first I want to take you to the Church of St. Mary Major and the Chapel of the Renunciation. If you just look up St. Mary Major in Assisi, you'll go to this beautiful website, and they have a number of videos. And it's important to listen to the description. And I'm going to play the video for you. Richard's going to play it for you so you can get an idea of why it was so important, first of all, for Carlo to be buried in this particular chapel because of what it represents. Now, there's a ton of people visiting Assisi, as you can imagine. I'm sure there are also many people up in Torino. We're very close to Assisi, only about 25, 30 minutes. And as I mentioned, I did chat with my friends who live there full time, and they told me it's been so busy, such an exciting time. But St. Mary Major is actually a very small church, so I'm wondering, and Deacon Dom and I are going to try to make it up there this week, because it's so close to us. I'm wondering about the lines, because once you go into the church, I mean, it's very organized the way they bring people in and out. But once you go into the church, there's only one main aisle, and then you turn right, and then you go around to be in front of the tomb. But it's a smaller church, nothing like, for example, the Cathedral of Turin or St. Peter's or any of the major basilicas in Rome, for example. But it is a beautiful little church that sits in between Santa Chiara, which is above it. You actually come out of Santa Chiara, you go down this beautiful cobblestone street, and you actually pass by this little piazza, and you see the church to your left. And you go further down, and you hit the Basilica of San Francesco. It's a beautiful church and a very special place for Carlo Acutis, and that's why he wanted to be buried there. Let's roll it, Richard.
We are in Assisi, in the ancient church of Santa Maria Maggiore, united with the bishop residence, where 8 centuries ago, young Francis stripped himself of everything to conform himself to Jesus, the Son of God, who stripped himself of his divine glory to be one of us until death, and death on the cross. Francis understood that only by stripping of our service and putting on Christ, we can be happy. This is also explained by a young man of our time, Carlo Acutis, buried in this shrine. He used to say, "Not me, but God." He also said, if we want to be original how we are born and not photocopies as we often become, there is only one way: to follow Jesus. Stripping is the secret of a beautiful, joyful, generous life, a real life.
So that is a description from the church itself of St. Mary Major and the Chapel of Renunciation in the beautiful Umbrian town of Assisi, which is about 2 hours north of Rome. And again, it's been very busy there all year long. The Jubilee year, of course, Assisi is always a major pilgrimage spot, but also because of the upcoming canonization. And there is something new, and Deacon Dom and I are hopefully going to check that out this week, as I mentioned, at that church. There is a beautiful new statue of Carlo Acutis that was done by the wonderful sculptor Timothy Schmaltz from Canada, and it depicts Carlo outside the church, a bronze sculpture of him, statue, holding, of course, a computer, and on the computer screen, an image of a chalice with the Eucharist, of course. So this is something to definitely put on your bucket list when you come to Italy. You need to go to Assisi because there's so much to see. In addition to the great St. Francis, and by the way, next year will be a big year of St. Francis because it will mark 800 years since his passing in October, right? It'll be October 4th is his feast day. And of course, Santa Chiara, and so much more in this gorgeous medieval town that looks in some ways much like it did centuries ago in the time of St. Francis. Now we head north and we go all the way up to Torino, the beautiful city of Torino. And that is where we find the burial place, the tomb of the other saint that will be canonized this weekend, and that is Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati. Now, the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist is best known for housing the Shroud of Turin and also for its stunning Renaissance architecture. However, when you walk in, and if you turn to the left to go down one of the main aisles, you will come across the beautiful tomb of this great young, just wonderful young man who loved the Lord and who loved serving the poor so much. And that's what's so interesting about Carlo and Pier Giorgio Frassati, Carlo Acutis and Pier Giorgio Frassati. They both come from northern Italy. They both died very young. Pier Giorgio was in his 20s. Carlo, of course, was a teenager. But they both had such a love of Jesus and the Eucharist and also such a love for the poor. As a matter of fact, that's how, not Carlo Acutis, but that's how Pier Giorgio Frassati became ill, because he was working among the sick and the poor, and he died as a result of contracting an illness. And he would give away his clothes, and his parents really had no idea how much he loved the poor or the kind of work he was doing. He really kind of was very humble about it and didn't tell too many people, but at his funeral, thousands filled the streets of Torino. That's what he did for that community. And also they had in common the fact that their families were not all that faithful. I was doing some research for the show this morning and came across a great interview that our own Chris Stefani did with the mother of Carlo Acutis. And she said it was her son who brought her back to the church. And Pier Giorgio Frassati's family was really not faithful at all. I mean, they were Catholic. But again, after they got to know their son and what he was actually doing after his death, they realized what a faithful young man he was and how much they needed to be more like him. So there's so many beautiful similarities between these two young men who are both going to be canonized this weekend in Rome. And we want you to be there, even if you can't join all of us in person in Rome or in Italy. You can go to EWTN.com for all the information. There's an article today at Catholic News Agency, all the details on how to watch. But both places, Turin Cathedral and St. Mary Major in Assisi, two places to put on your bucket list, and they're both in Shrines and Wonders. Speaking of Italy, Joan Lewis is with us, and she's up next. Yay, she was able to join us, thank goodness. She's a busy lady. Just got off a train and walked into her apartment, her beautiful apartment in Rome. Our own Joan's Rome with us, Joan Lewis. Thank you for the beautiful e-card. You always send the cutest e-cards for my birthday. I really appreciate it.
I know. Well, you're a special person, so I spend time looking for special cards for Teresa.
The typewriter was very apropos for both of us. I thought that was
exactly.
that was very cute.
Given the work
writers.
that both of us do, exactly.
Yep.
But so
all right, my dear. Well, what's it like in Rome? Is it because I know up here
beautiful, sunny, warm. I don't know the temperature, but in Parma, where my sister and my niece and I were, I mean, it was cooler. It was pleasant. It was wonderful. And Modena, in that area, we went to where they manufacture prosciutto.
Yum.
And I mean, you just want to eat it by the kilo when you taste it at a place where they've made it, because they serve it to you.
Right.
And then we saw where they make the great big Parmesan cheese.
The Parmesan wheels?
Parmigiano Reggiano. The great big 100-pound, what they call wheels of Parmesan.
Right.
So I bought a whole bunch of, not wheels, but Parmesan for different people I know. You will be
incredible.
the
It's
beneficiary
incredible.
of one of those.
Both products are delicious.
Yeah.
All you need, just get that and some bread and a glass of wine, and you're good, right?
Oh, heavens, that's all you need. Your little Prosecco, or you have some of the local wine. They served us a wonderful Lambrusco, which was like a very light red, bubbly, like a Prosecco type thing, but it was wonderful. And that's what they served us when they at the cheese place, because we were in a bigger group at the cheese place, and where they show the prosciutto, how they age that, and what you eventually get when you go to the store and ask them to give you half a pound of prosciutto. But then it was a much longer drive to the factory where they make Modena's balsamic vinegar.
Yeah.
And so very special places give you a whole new feeling for these very typical, wonderful, in Italy only dishes and flavors, So, but no, we lucked out. The only time it rained was when we all met at our hotel in Parma. We went out before dinner in the garden to have a drink, and one look at the clouds said, I don't think we're going to be dry by the end of the evening. So we, but who cares? You still have your Prosecco or whatever. It rains, you go inside and wait till it stops, then you go and have dinner.
Exactly.
So it's a beautiful part of Rome, but a beautiful part of Italy, but it's always fun to come back to a place like when you're trying to get around. We were looking for a restaurant to eat at last night. We knew where our hotel was, but then you get online or whatever, try and find, because the food is so exquisite in that part of Italy. And, it's like, okay, here's a great place, but how far is it? Do we walk 4 blocks or do we walk 40? So a wonderful trip, just, 3 days. My sister and her daughter, my niece, leave tomorrow for the States. They've had a cruise, disembarked in Venice, came down to Parma, and so we had these anytime, as anybody listening knows, as you, Teresa, know, anytime with family is very, very special.
Yep.
So,
and being in Italy together with family makes it even more special. Now,
yes.
There's so many
people
heading.
To say when you say grace, and thank God for making Italy. So, exactly.
Thank you, God, for making Italy. That's what I tell all of our pilgrims when we say grace. After we say grace, and thank you, God, for making.
But now you know where I live, right across from the Vatican. I'm just 3 short blocks from St. Peter's Square, where the biggest event, one of the biggest events of the year, certainly after the election and then First Mass of Pope Leo, the canonization Sunday of wonderful young Carlo Acutis, and then Pier Giorgio Frassati, who died 100 years ago, but at the age of 24. So 2 very young, wonderful, extraordinary men who were considered average by everybody they knew. Hey, just one of us, just a guy, And they were far from average if on Sunday they're being welcomed into the kingdom of heaven as saints. But I don't know numbers yet, Teresa. I haven't seen any predictions. And once, I think a couple of weeks ago, you and I talked about this, because I went on the Vatican, or we both did, went on the Vatican website, and there's no tickets for Sunday's canonization. So, at this point, are 80,000 people going to be there, or are 220,000 going to be in St. Peter's Square? And that's really hard to answer. So there have been events, obviously in Turin, where Pier Giorgio's from. There are events in Assisi, where Carlo Acutis is from, and special events, obviously, here in Rome. Many other things. There were prayer vigils. There have been videos. There have been many types of meetings on these 2 young men. And there's going to be a press conference tomorrow in Rome, at the Vatican press conference. And then at the 6th, there's a public prayer service which will be held in the Church of Santa Maria in Traspontina, which is at the far end of Via della Conciliazione. So anybody coming in for the canonization, when they get to know the area, they will go to this prayer vigil, spend the night in Rome, and then probably very early be up to go through security, because that's the whole thing. Teresa, we don't have numbers. If you knew 80,000 people were going, that's one number for security. That's pretty awesome. But if you knew it was 200 or more, but I'm sure the Vatican's going to have every one of the security points open. So since
I've only heard, I saw one story that said, well, it's so generic, tens of thousands. Well, no kidding, tens of thousands. But the concern that I would
sometimes at an Angelus,
Right, exactly. But you'll have to get there because of the popularity of these two young men, and they have such a great following around the world.
Yeah.
I would think people are going to be lining up very early to get in.
Oh, I think so. Even well before security itself has opened.
Right.
On big days like this, security normally opens around 7. It could be 6, because really, really big events, John Paul's canonization and others, the Vatican had to open it up earlier than they even thought, because the crowds were there. Huge crowds would be around by 6:30 or 7, even though Mass wasn't going to begin for 2 or 2.5 hours. So they're looking at it all. The Vatican is capable of having 300,000, if that's how many came. Actually, for big events lately, especially where any heads of state have come, you're not going to have that for like you did for the papal first Mass or something of Leo. But the security going in is one thing, but getting out, if there's any heads of state visiting, their security seems to take precedence over everything else at the end of the event. So that will be, something to watch. I'm thinking you're just going to have, I don't know what world leaders other than Italian leaders, prime ministers, presidents would be in the square. So getting out of big events lately, I have discovered, can be a bit of a trial. But the Vatican's up to anything. All you need is a little patience. Hopefully you have good walking shoes, Hopefully you're comfortably dressed. Oh, and hopefully, obviously, the weather is good, but not overwhelmingly hot or anything else. Because, people can take heat, but lately, except for today, the general audience, of course, was in St. Peter's Square. But for several weeks, the Pope, because of the very hot weather, Pope Leo had called it, it took place in the Paul VI Hall. So, but... No, I'm glad.
How are you seeing when you got back to town today? How were the crowds? What was it like? I mean, just in terms of the general. Because when we landed on Sunday in Fiumicino, the airport was crazy. I've never seen it that busy.
Oh, really?
It was crazy.
Oh, well, you know why? Oh, you mean a couple of days ago? Well,
yeah,
let
Sunday.
me tell you, that's the end of the travel of the vacation season for Italians.
Well, it's for Ferragosto, but then there were a lot of people.
Massive numbers on boats, massive numbers driving. Train. I would not want to have been on an Italian highway on Sunday, or airport apparently. But,
it wasn't bad on the road coming up to Umbria. It wasn't bad at all. Yeah. But it was the end of obviously the famous holiday season of August. But the other thing I thought of, I did see a lot of Americans coming in, a lot of groups, a lot of pilgrimage buses. So that was very busy. But September, as you and I both know, is even if you're not looking at the canonization, that's a huge touring month in Italy because the weather is so
very,
great.
Very big month. And in many, many cases, it's big because people who could not come for some reason during the summer will come, or didn't want to come in the summer when entire families are here, etc. A couple wants to come, and they'll come later in the fall, or September, or October. So, but now, I can't speak to crowds because we got in a taxi. There were plenty of people at the train station, but there always are, you know. And maybe today more than any other time, because there's a train strike, a 2-day train strike starting tomorrow.
Tomorrow and Friday. Yep, I saw that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh,
so,
joy.
Well, hopefully, I worry about the Italians who wanted to get to Rome for the canonization, because you've got 2 Italians being canonized. You know, people are going to want to come from all over the country.
Well, I did read a story, a couple of different stories, because I'm always keeping up on this for my clients at Tease Italy as well as just for my own information, but that they are going to be open again, up and running on Saturday, so people can still get there. It's just if they wanted to go in a little bit early to do some extra.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Pilgrimage.
You either had to be in today,
yeah.
And I want to tell you, my niece took a picture of one of the boards that tells you, when the trains are leaving, et cetera, for the 25 destinations or Italy and abroad. And every single one, I think except one on this board, was late. Everywhere from 10 minutes to 45 minutes.
Wow.
So we totally lucked out. Well, actually, we had to take a train from Parma to Bologna, and Bologna is where, if you're going to go north to south, south to north in Italy, you're going to change a train in Bologna. Mm-hmm. And the international fast trains, they have 3 levels underground in the station. You have to know the station or become familiar with it very, very quickly. So our 11 o'clock train to Bologna from Parma was going to be so late we would miss the train to Rome, and obviously everything connected to it, like this radio show. And so we just went up on the platform. Beth and I got on our phones. We saw there was a train that left at 10:54. That seemed to be okay, and it was going to be on the same platform as our train. So we went up there. We got on the train. We did not have a ticket for this train, so we just kept hoping the ticket collector would understand that, we had to be on the 11 o'clock. That was late. So it worked out because the ticket collector never came. So, I mean, we had a legitimate ticket. We just didn't have one for a seat on that train. But here we are. So
Thank goodness. I got your email this morning, and I know because we use the trains quite frequently going to go down to Rome.
Sure.
And I'm like, oh my goodness, I hope she's on time. But we really appreciate it because it's great stuff and great information. So we're going to be following you all week long with your wonderful blog, jonesrome@wordpress.com, to get the latest on the canonizations. And I know you're going to have special reports, and then we'll kind of regroup next week and discuss. I'm trying to get down there. I'm hoping I can get down there with Dominic on Saturday.
Sorry, let me just take 20 seconds to say that the Pope was given a BMW motorbike today, a fantastic, I'll post pictures of it, fantastic BMW motorbike, white, which he signed, and it's a beautiful signature, Leo the 14th in today's date, and then the bike is going to be auctioned off, and the money is going through a Vatican office to Madagascar, where a school for poor children will be built.
That's awesome. Got to go, sweetie. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks for that update, including the latest on the Pope. And we'll have more, of course, next week with Joan. Thank you so much for joining us on a Wednesday, EWTN's Catholic Connection, Monday through Friday at this very time. We're moving into hour number 2 on EWTN's Radio Extra. Looking forward to our conversation with Professor Richard Sherlock. He'll be in studio with us this morning because tonight he's going to be with the one, the only, Father Mitch Pacwa, to discuss the differences in the beliefs of Catholics and Mormons. That's a really, I think, interesting topic because many of us know of Mormons, but we may not be aware, for example, of exactly what they believe. And so we're going to dive into that and find out how and why Professor Sherlock is so interested in this important topic. So we'll have 2 segments with him. Before that, though, in our 2 cents segment, I want to dive into this report a little bit more deeply, the report that I mentioned in the news. That is a study that Catholic News Agency had on their website today, catholicnewsagency.com, about the difference in women who go through with their pregnancies versus those who, God forbid, have an abortion, and the psychological impact on women. This is something that is rarely discussed, and unfortunately, women have been sold a bill of goods, that it's either just a choice or it's a blob of cells. Nothing could be further from the truth. When I started to really research this topic, it ended up to be a big, huge chapter in my book, Extreme Makeover. I called it The Abortion Distortion. I was furious. And I'm still furious because not enough of us, women, men, everybody on the planet, know regarding the fallout from abortion. in addition to the taking of a human life. We'll talk about that in 2 cents. Stay tuned. More Catholic Connection coming up on EWTN's Radio Extra channel.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tamio, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tamio.
We appreciate your listenership every day, every show. Catholic Connection, EWTN Radio Extra. Thanks for tuning in to hour number 2 of this program, produced by EWTN. Great to be back with you. Thank you to my dear little sis, Vanessa Denhagarmo, my sister in Christ, sister from another mister, as we say. And she filled in for me yesterday, and I believe I'm going to be on her show, Epiphany, later on in the week to talk about the upcoming canonizations this weekend as we are back in Bella Italia. But it is good to be back on the air with you. Of course, we had Labor Day off last week, and we were at the radio conference, which was exciting. So a lot going on. But there's also a lot going on, as Joan Lewis said in the first hour of the program, with the canonizations. And EWTN is everywhere, so we're going to be there big time with lots of great coverage for the next several days, including full, as we say in the business, gavel-to-gavel coverage of the actual event itself, taking place Sunday morning with the Pope presiding over the Mass in St. Peter's Square for the canonizations of Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati and Carlo Acutis. So it's going to be a great rest of the week with so much going on. And a lot going on here, too, so we want to make sure you stay tuned. Coming up after the news and the weather and all that good stuff, I want to take a look at that study that was published today in the Catholic News Agency website, and also I believe it's on the Register as well. And it is about the fallout of abortion and how many women are struggling with so many psychological disorders, emotional issues. And what is really important about this study is that it was done by a secular institution, a secular entity. That backs up what we know to be true in terms of life and the reality of abortion, because it's always, always evil and never, ever acceptable. And then when you have a secular entity, a research organization or a professional group, medical professionals who are away from the church, it can be something to use, information to use. Obviously, we know it's true. We don't need another study. But it can be something to use to help people understand about the fallout from abortion, because most people have just been lulled into this sense of, oh, it's a very personal choice. Oh, it's, a woman should have the option. And these stories, these horror stories that are out there, are not reported. And as I was saying, as we were introducing this hour, in the previous hour of the program, before we broke for EWTN Radio Extra, how many people, including myself for many years, are in the dark about this? And women have been lied to. They're not given the truth about abortion. So we'll discuss this study, and we'll give you the website where you can find it, and that comes up at 2 cents. And then we're going to be talking with Professor Richard Sherlock. He'll be in studio with us this morning. He's going to discuss differences in beliefs of Catholics and Mormons, and he is on with Father Mitch tonight as well. So I'm excited to spend a little bit of time with him, and of course Father Mitch back on with us tomorrow. So that is the rundown, as we say in the biz. Let's take a look at the weather before we give you the news on a busy Wednesday morning, September 3rd. The National Weather Service is saying very hot temperatures in the west, heavy rainfall, and flooding potential in the southwest. Hot to extremely hot temperatures are in place across coastal Southern California again today, and the interior northwest into Thursday, so all the way into tomorrow, with the Pacific Northwest carrying the potential for record-breaking high temps. There's a combination of monsoon moisture and tropical moisture ahead of Tropical Cyclone Lorena that will bring heavy rainfall and the potential for flooding through the week. So it looks like there are some areas that are going to get hit by a lot of heavy rain, so keep that in mind. And of course, out west, you still have an awful lot of heat that is affecting that portion of the country. Right now, it's 4 minutes past the hour. We appreciate your listening to the second hour of Catholic Connection, which comes to you every day on EWTN's Radio Extra. Let's get started with the news. More than 1,400 people now have been killed in Sunday's earthquake in Afghanistan. Keir Simmons tells us at least 3,200 people are also reported to be hurt, and the figure has been rising as rescuers contend with rugged terrain in the country's mountainous east.
Some of the villages that were impacted by the quake are incredibly remote, and then the earthquake itself has blocked roads, so rescuers have been struggling simply to get to people.
Officials with the Afghan Red Crescent Society, meanwhile, say they fear more people are trapped beneath rubble. The ruling Taliban has put out a call for international aid. Pope Leo has expressed his condolences for the over 1,000 people who have been killed in Sudan's western Darfur region. Devin Watkins has that story from the Vatican.
A landslide wiped out Teresa, a village in Sudan's Darfur region, on August 31st, following several days of heavy rainfall. At least 1,000 people were killed in the village in the Mara Mountains area, according to the Sudan Liberation Movement Army. The movement appealed to international aid organizations and the United Nations on Monday for help recovering the bodies of victims. In their statement, the Sudan Liberation Movement, which controls the area located in the Darfur region but has not taken sides in the civil conflict, said the entire village has been completely leveled to the ground. Initial information indicates the death of all village residents, read the statement, estimated to be more than 1,000 people. Only one person survived, it added. The ruling Sovereign Council in Khartoum mourned the deaths of the innocent residents of Tarasin, saying it has mobilized rescue forces to assist in the area. Sudan's civil conflict has raged for over 2 years after the tensions between the country's military and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces exploded. The United Nations and other aid groups have not been able to access many areas in the Darfur region due to the fighting, including villages in the Mara Mountains. Doctors Without Borders, a medical charity, previously warned that the area represents a black hole in the humanitarian response in Sudan. The Mara Mountains are a rugged volcanic chain that runs for 160 kilometers to the southwest of El Fasher, a flashpoint in the conflict. Many displaced families have fled El Fasher for the relative safety of the mountainous region. Over 40,000 people have reportedly been killed and 14 million others displaced due to Sudan's civil conflict, with famine and disease running rampant in the war-torn Darfur region. I'm Devin Watkins.
Vice President Vance is set to visit Minneapolis today following the school shooting last week at Annunciation Catholic School. He's being joined by Second Lady Usha Vance as they hold a series of private meetings conveying their condolences to the families of those impacted by the tragedy. The number of those hurt in the shooting now standing at 18 children, 3 adults, 2 children were killed. Mark Mayfield tells us the Orange County Sheriff's Department in California announcing the arrest of an armed man accused of threatening a Catholic monastery there.
Joshua Richardson from Alabama was arrested on August 26th after showing up at St. Michael's Abbey in Silverado Canyon. Investigators say he started by sending threatening emails, then made more threats in person. Richardson was allegedly in possession of high-capacity magazines, body armor, brass knuckles, and knives. Investigators believe he drove to Orange County from his home in Alabama. I'm Mark Mayfield.
We'll be talking about this study in more detail coming up in our 2 Cents segment on a Wednesday morning, but a recent report finding the rate of mental health-related hospitalizations doubled for women who had abortions compared with women who gave birth. The study, as Catholic News Agency reports, was released this summer through the Journal of Psychiatric Research, compared abortions with other pregnancies in hospitals in Quebec, Canada, between 2006 and 2022, tracking information on women for up to 17 years. The study, comparing more than 1.2 million women who gave birth in Quebec hospitals with more than 28,000 who had abortions, and found that rates of mental health-related hospitalizations were higher following induced abortion rather than a pregnancy. The study also found abortion was associated with a number of mental health-related difficulties, including hospitalization for psychiatric disorders, substance use disorders, and suicide attempts. President Trump is now vowing to send the National Guard to the city of Chicago.
Well, we're going in. I didn't say when. We're going in. When you lose, look, I have an obligation. This isn't a political thing. I have an obligation.
Yesterday, the president also repeatedly said that Governor Pritzker should call him and that he would be happy to help him fight crime in his home state of Illinois. Trump's comments following a violent Labor Day weekend in the city of Chicago, which saw at least 58 people shot, 8 of them killed. Meanwhile, the mayor of Washington, D.C. is ordering the city to coordinate with federal law enforcement. Yesterday, Mayor Muriel Bowser issuing an executive order requiring indefinite coordination with federal officials amid the administration's crackdown in the city. Bowser issuing a statement saying the order will provide the pathway forward beyond the presidential emergency. The Trump administration's federalization of the city's police force expires next week. Brian Shook explains Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the U.S. has conducted a lethal strike on a drug vessel in the southern Caribbean.
In a post on X, Rubio said the drug vessel had departed from Venezuela and was being operated by a designated narco-terrorist organization. His post came just moments after President Trump had referenced the strike while speaking in the Oval Office. Trump said there were a lot of drugs on the boat. This comes after the U.S. deployed warships near Venezuela. I'm Brian Shook.
A U.S. district judge saying the deployment of National Guard troops to Los Angeles did violate federal law. The president deploying the troops in response to protests against his immigration operations in the city earlier this year. Judge Charles Breyer said while individuals engaged in violence during those protests, there was no rebellion, according to him, nor was civilian law enforcement unable to respond to the protests and enforce the law. The judge's ruling bars the use of troops in California to execute the laws there. However, the ruling is paused pending further legal action. Russian spy planes are being spotted more often near Alaska, catching the eye of the military. Congressman Tony Gonzalez saw it firsthand during a recent visit.
The week I was there, it was a Wednesday, and they had already done 4 intrusions, which is higher than normal.
The San Antonio Republican says that each time fighter jets were scrambled to monitor the potential spy planes, NORAD said in a statement the Russian aircraft never entered U.S. or Canadian sovereign territory. Instead, they were in international zone off Alaska. And the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee is making public the first batch of documents related to the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein.
Epstein and his accomplices stole their innocence, stole their very lives in some cases, stole their hopes and dreams and aspirations, and ruined them in so many ways.
House Speaker Mike Johnson speaking to reporters yesterday after the committee met with victims in that case, a committee saying it did receive the files from the DOJ in response to a subpoena for documents related to Epstein. The over 33,000 pages of material provided to the panel were released across multiple files and folders on Google Drive and Dropbox. And the American Bar Association, which oversees law school accreditation, is under fire for doubling down on their support for DEI. That's why some states, including Texas, are looking to make some changes.
Moving that accreditation back to the Texas Supreme Court, which had it originally, is a very good idea because the judges on that court are elected.
Sherry Sylvester is with the Texas Public Policy Foundation and says the Bar Association does not have a great track record. They have been caught demanding that law schools recruit based on race instead of test scores. Giving accreditation power to the state Supreme Court, she says, put the power in the hands of elected officials. And Michael Kastner tells us on a Wednesday, cool air and fall-like temperatures are expected to impact millions of Americans for the rest of the week.
You know what? At least the weather's turned. Oh, sweater weather. Sweater weather. Sweater weather. Oh, God,
the below-average temperatures are being caused by an intense dip in the polar jet stream, and a cold front associated with that dip will also increase the chance of showers and storms in the upper Midwest on Tuesday. Forecasts suggest it's likely that dozens of places will set record cold temperatures on Thursday and Friday afternoon. Temperatures may start to rebound by next week as the jet stream breaks down and allows for summer-like conditions to return. I'm Michael Kastner.
And it's been a record weekend for airline travel. Ryan Chandler says the TSA expects to have screened more than 17 million passengers at U.S. airports through yesterday, making it the busiest Labor Day travel period on record. AAA saying ticket prices of domestic flights were down 6% from last year as well, so that's good news travel-wise. We travel to a break, and then we'll be right back for 2 cents. Stay tuned. Welcome back, Catholic Connection. It is a Wednesday. Feels like a Monday for me. Had a couple of days off after traveling back, and now we are back in central Italy, in Umbria, about 30 miles south of Assisi. Hope to get to Assisi this week before the canonization, and then hoping to get down to Rome, hopefully if there's trains. There's a train strike coming up tomorrow and Friday, but we are told, as Joan said earlier in the program, in the first hour, it will reopen on Saturday morning. We are glad you tuned in to the second hour of Catholic Connection here on EWTN's Radio Extra. And I want to start out by rereading it, I should say, that I ran in both newscasts, both the 9 and the 10 o'clock hours, or the first and second hours of Catholic Connection. This is such an important issue related to the evils of abortion. And it's part of this overall culture of death that is not discussed. And the media poo-poo it, or they ignore it. And how do I know this? Because I've been investigating this particular aspect of this big story, this big issue, for decades. So much so that I wrote a book called Extreme Makeover, Women Transformed by Christ, Not Conformed to the Culture, that was published about 12 years ago by Ignatius Press. And they had a whole chapter in there called Abortion Distortion. And as it relates not just to the medical community and how they've been trained to suppress information or put out false information, how also the media put out that false information and, take their talking points from the left and the pro-abortion groups. And women, the people they say they care so much about, because they're all about so-called personal freedom and choice, are left with little or no information, and their lives are ruined in many cases. All right, so here's this particular study. A recent study found that the rate of mental health-related hospitalizations doubled for women who had abortions compared with women who gave birth. The study, published this summer in the Journal of Psychiatric Research, compared abortions with other pregnancies in hospitals in Quebec, Canada, between 2006 and 2022. And they tracked information on women for up to 17 years. The study compared more than 1.2 million women who gave birth in Quebec hospitals with more than 28,000 women who had abortions, and found that the rates of mental health-related hospitalization were higher following induced abortions compared to women who had their children or pregnancies, other pregnancies. The study found abortion was associated with a number of mental health-related difficulties, including hospitalization for psychiatric disorders, substance use disorders, and suicide attempts. Now, this is hardly breaking news for those of us who've been looking at this issue for decades. It has been something that has been so prevalent that an organization was formed called the Silent No More Awareness Campaign. And what you can do is actually just look up Silent No More Awareness, and it will give you some very, very powerful stories about the fallout of abortion. I've interviewed many of those women involved in the Silent No More Awareness Campaign, and their stories are gut-wrenching. Oftentimes the women went in without the complete information. They were pressured, and that's the other thing that doesn't get out there, the fact that so many women are pressured to have abortions, and yet it's all about choice, right? But the fallout in terms of the emotional impact, not to mention, we don't have time to go into all the data regarding women who struggle with physical problems associated with their abortions because of the conditions that these so-called, abortion clinics, and clinics are supposed to actually help people, not hurt people. So don't even get me started with that. We don't have time anyway. But the bottom line is, okay, here you have this organization, or this publication, the Journal of Psychiatric Research. Why isn't this a headline beyond Catholic News Agency, conservative websites? Why aren't the members of the medical community taking this to the press and say, we have to talk about this? If we really, really care about women, we need to discuss this. This has lifelong impact. I mean, let's just look at this let's do an analogy. I'm sure many of you may know someone in your own circle of family and friends, and maybe if you're a woman, this happened to you, and maybe you had a miscarriage. Think about how painful that was. And that's even a topic that doesn't get enough attention in terms of how do we help women and couples through the grief of a miscarriage. But think about the devastation of the loss of that child. And you physically had nothing to do with it. For whatever reason, your body rejected that baby. And it was a natural process. And yet there's still mourning involved. There's still great grief. So then, what do you think happens if a woman who's pregnant makes a decision to end the life of her own child? You can't tell me that there isn't this emotional bond already, because the science backs it up. And something else that is very chilling, very beautiful, but very chilling if you have an abortion, that every time a woman is pregnant, whether she gives birth, God forbid, has an abortion or has a miscarriage, that's by no fault of her own, cells from that child remain within her. There is that physical attachment, there is that emotional attachment. And how many times have you heard of stories of stars or famous musicians or vocalists who've had abortions, and you hear in the background that there was a song that they wrote about them because they had to basically get it out because it was still so deep, the pain was so deep in their heart. That's because it's not natural, and the psychological fallout is huge. There's so much evidence to show also a connection, as this story alludes to, in terms of substance use disorders, substance abuse. In the research I did in my book, Extreme Makeover, I was stunned to see how, if you look at many of the societal issues in our world today, again, as we say here, substance abuse, suicide attempts, attempted suicides, depression, all these different problems. And if you think about how many abortions we still have in this country every year, at least 1 to 2 million? You mean to tell me we are not a society of walking wounded, connected to abortion? I always say abortion is like this giant octopus with tentacles going everywhere, sucking the life out of us and the rest of the world. And it's not just the people who are victims of abortion, of the abortion industry. And in many ways they are victims because they may not have had the information at the time, as I mentioned earlier. The people who help procure an abortion, others who are surrounded by that. There are now groups, different helpful organizations for grandparents who have lost a grandchild through abortion. And the memorial for the unborn is coming up this month. This will be a time to really get this particular story that's posted on the Catholic News Agency site out there so more people know that the fallout from abortion, post-abortion syndrome, is not something that was just made up by a political organization, conservative organization trying to push an agenda. It's real. So where can you go for more information? Instead of just going to, which you should, to read the report, in addition to going to the Catholic News Agency website and the Journal of Psychiatric Research, I would encourage you to go to the Silent No More awareness campaign, where women who kept silent about the pain of their abortion, I'm talking emotional pain, in some cases, many cases, physical pain as well, have been out there for decades, giving talks, leading retreats, speaking at the March for Life, and refusing to remain silent no more. We have to get this information into the hands of as many people as possible, especially through the media, so this evil can stop. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Catholic Connection. It is a Wednesday morning. It's September 3rd, 2025. Great to be with you. Unfortunately, our guest has not arrived in the studio yet, so we are going to hold off on giving you any more information about our guest. We did tell you that Dr. Sherlock is someone who converted from the Mormon faith to Catholicism. He is going to be on with Father Mitch tonight. So you can watch him on Father Mitch live on EWTN, and the topic will be the differences of beliefs of Catholics and Mormons. So that's going to be a great show. I don't want to dive into the topic since we probably won't be able to have him on. We'll try to grab him maybe for the remainder of the program, but I just want to let you know he is in town apparently in Irondale. Of course, he'll be appearing, as I mentioned tonight, that he is going to be on this evening with Father Mitch Pacwa on EWTN Live, and the guest is Professor Richard Sherlock, and he'll be discussing tonight live differences in the beliefs of Catholics and Mormons. Now, he was also on the Journey Home, so if you actually Google Journey Home on EWTN or just put Journey Home Richard Sherlock, or maybe go to the Journey Home, the Coming Home Network website, as well as our YouTube page at EWTN.com, it will probably come up there. But I would say just tune in tonight because Father Mitch always has wonderful guests. I'm really sorry he couldn't join us this morning because I was really looking forward to that. However, I did want to mention, because we've been talking a lot about the canonizations, and I wanted to refer you to another important story that's out there in terms of how to watch the different events that are coming up, because we are going to have, as we say, gavel to gavel coverage, and we're so excited because obviously we have a team in Rome, and Monsi Alvarado, Peter Gagnon will be there live, and of course Monsi, I believe, will be anchoring most of the coverage, so that is pretty darn exciting. And we are going to be doing all kinds of great coverage, and there will be so many different ways that you can watch the canonization, which will be Sunday morning about, I think it's usually about 10 o'clock. The Mass will be starting. That's the schedule I heard earlier. Okay, the story is entitled, How to Watch the Canonizations of Carlo Acutis and Pier Giorgio Frassati. And this, again, is by actually our PR director, Michelle Johnson. EWTN News and EWTN Studios will join forces in Rome this weekend, September 3rd through the 7th, to televise the canonizations of Carlo Acutis and Pier Giorgio Frassati. In addition to the canonizations, viewers who want an in-depth look in the life and legacy of these two young saints-to-be will have a great opportunity to tune in to 12, did you hear that? 12 EWTN special programs, including animated children's programs. All right, so here's what you can expect. And this is so cool. This is such a long list of different opportunities to find out more about these two soon-to-be saints. You can watch, of course, our EWTN News Nightly and EWTN News in Depth programs. They'll have an exclusive preview of the canonization, and that will be 6 p.m. Eastern and 9 p.m. Eastern, Friday, September 5th, for EWTN News Nightly. And then EWTN News in Depth airs at 5 p.m. Eastern, and then 10:30 p.m. Eastern on the same day. And the amazing news correspondent for EWTN, Colm Flynn, will host a 1-hour special. This is going to be so cool. From the rooftop of EWTN's Rome studio. Is so beautiful. Overlooks St. Peter's Square. So he'll be doing a special, and that will be on the eve of the canonization, okay? So if that's not enough for you, all right, you also have Father Patrick Briscoe. He's an expert on Carlo Acutis. He's a biographer, and EWTN Vatican correspondent Courtney Mayers and EWTN Vatican correspondent Christina Malari will provide commentary on the canonizations and share reflections with him on the impact of Pope Leo XIV's first saints. So think about this. All this happening so quickly this year. Pope Leo, right, gets elected as the Holy Father, the Vicar of Christ, and then we moved through the summer. It was a very busy summer for him, and now he is going to be celebrating his first canonization Mass. All right? And in the half hour leading up to the canonization Mass and the half hour after it ends, EWTN News Vatican correspondents will conduct live interviews and candid reactions with pilgrims from around the world. So, EWTN.com, Catholic News Agency, for all the information. Up next, a special interview we're going to re-air for you, my friend Chuck Gaidica, a convert, all about Mary. Stay tuned. Good to be with you on EWTN's Global Radio Network, Catholic Radio Network, their production of Catholic Connection, Monday through Friday, right here on this very, very show. Good to be with you again. And good to be with my friend Chuck Gaidica from Metro Detroit. Of course, we kind of grew up together in the secular media. He's retired now from the secular media. He's a former meteorologist and reporter and anchor, and just so experienced in all things media, all things environment and weather. Now he is a revert to the faith, as a beautiful testimony. And he also is a wellness coach, but does spend a lot of time speaking on his reversion and the Catholic Church. And so my wonderful producer, one of my producers, Deb, said, let's get Chuck back on. He's so awesome. I said, ooh, it's perfect because we're talking about the Feast of the Assumption, which is tomorrow. And of course, we just talked about St. Max Colby, which is today. But Chuck, I know that you love Our Lady, and I just wanted to hear a little bit of your specifics in terms of when you were away from the church. You were never anti-Catholic, because we've been friends forever, and we would do events together, and you knew that I was, back in the church and whatnot. But what was your feeling when you became more involved in the Protestant church community about the Blessed Mother? Did it ever change, or about the saints? What are your thoughts on that, and how do you look at it now? And thanks for joining us.
Yeah, good morning. It's interesting, Teresa, because when I left television, news, and radio, secular media, as you put it. I was on staff at a large non-denominational church, and I remember that I didn't have the impediments. I didn't have the tripping hazards of throw rugs, in my way that kept me away from the church, the Catholic Church. But at the same time, there were things that were important to me. And I do remember that at the time I didn't realize there was even an underlying anti-Catholic spirit, I guess I would call it, in some of the leadership of this church. But I remember, for instance, coming up near Christmas, and the plan was underway, what are we going to do? Which is every church really goes through that in some ways. And I mentioned, well, why don't we sing Mary, Did You Know? Is there a more beautiful song? And I heard, oh, no, that's too Catholic. And I thought, this is so ironic to me, because Mary, Did You Know, which is a worldwide sensation, is written by a guy named Mark Lowry, who's also a Protestant and a Christian comedian. I've seen him in person. He's part of the Gaither Band forever. And I thought, that's so ironic that you would think singing a song about Mary and did you know who Jesus was when you gave birth to him would distance us from our non-denominational world. So that's where I was exposed to some of that on one end. But I never had issues with, as many do, with either reversion or conversion to the faith, because in my life, I had, and still do with my wife, Susan, such important women, mother figures in my life. My grandmother, who I grew up with living upstairs from me, who passed when she was 89, singularly, not to detract from my own mom, for the early part of my life, the singularly most important person in my life, my mother, Susan, when we got married, and it continues. And then to have even my first grade teacher, who I kept in contact with until her death at age 92, a motherly figure to me. And it has never been lost on me that if I follow that thread to thinking about Mary as the mother of God, which of course is a tripping hazard for many Protestants and non-Catholics, just that phrase alone, the idea to me that I would venerate or honor my grandmother, my mother, my parents in essence, my wife, watching my wife, give birth to 5 children, then having daughters and daughter-in-laws give birth to 8 grandchildren. How I honor them as women, how I honor them as mothers. So for me personally, this was not really an issue, and it was an easy ramp in for me with Mary.
How did Mary help you as you were making your way back?
Yeah. I don't think I knew it overtly. I don't think I saw a direct connection, but I would pray, and I understood I wasn't worshiping Mary, that I was venerating her. But I realized that even though Jesus, without question, is the reason for my salvation, although I've got a part in it, Mary played a role in this reversion of mine. And in Catholic belief, I think in general, but in my belief in particular, she played a crucial part in bringing Jesus into my world to begin with. And then I was able to believe both fully that he was God, fully that he was human, because of what I knew of Mary and the yes that she gave to God. And I just thought, how can you not honor?
Right.
How can you not honor that notion of who she is and the importance she has? And of course, this leads to the idea of we're surrounded by this great cloud of witnesses. You also mentioned saints. But as I would read Scripture, which I did a lot, I would see these examples right up through the end in Revelation, referring to, I can't imagine it's not referring to Mary as the mother of God. And so this symbol of God's love, the love that I had experienced from these important women in my life, and I would consider myself, I'm not going to say I'm a tough guy, I'm not an MMA fighter, but, you would think, even as I was contemplating speaking to you this morning, I'm thinking about this, praying about it, thinking, well, that's a kind of a softer side of Chuck. I don't know. You don't talk about that very much with people. But I think it's important for all of us, men and women, to consider where is this touch in our lives of a motherly figure, and how easy is that then to make that analogous to Mary in our lives.
Especially on the eve of the Assumption, many people are going to a vigil mass tonight. Deacon Dom's serving at the vigil mass tonight. So I thought it would be nice to talk about this. And Steve Ray is going to join us the next hour to get into more of the detail, the dogma and whatnot. But scripturally, it's so profound to me, because even in the Gospel of Luke, when St. Elizabeth says, and what is it that the mother of my Lord should come to me? So it's very clear. So I never understood that as to how people could just put aside where it's right there in Scripture.
I think when
the
we
mother
talk
of
to
my
others,
Lord.
Well, and so there you are. It's right in your face. And I think for me, for you, for any of us and friends that we may have that are Protestant or even non-believers or atheists, we've got to understand their context, right, when we're going to talk to them. Because if you jump right into that or go right to Revelation, or, she's the mother of God, which, of course, we can extend to the word Theotokos, a Greek word that the Orthodox, the Catholics, the Eastern Rite, even the Anglicans believe in that word of mother of God translated. If you start hitting them over the head with those apologetics in a hard way, they're going to back up. They may feel like they're, cornered, and they're going to lash out or worse, or just, retreat in general. And I think we've got to be very gentle with people that we have this conversation with, making them understand that first and foremost, I'm not worshiping Mary. And that word venerate or veneration, I don't walk up to you and go, hey, T, how are you? And Dom, I venerate you. I mean, we just don't use that word, in normal conversation as communicators. It's not something we use. So that tends to be a stumbling block all by itself that even some Catholics, I don't think, understand the difference between worshiping and veneration,
I do think, though, it's great to give them analogies. Like the analogy that you gave of the women in your life. And also, I think if you want to do something more with Scripture, see how Jesus treated women. I have a chapter in my book, Extreme Makeover, about Jesus being our greatest advocate and biggest woman's liberator to ever walk the earth, because he was so supportive of women. And the way he treated women and spoke with them and was seen with them in public is something that just was not done 2,000 years ago, especially with a Jewish man mixing with, for example, the Samaritan woman. So I find that is a really great way. And also talking to people about, well, do you have pictures of your family in your home or someone that has passed? Have you saved something, an item, just like we look at relics? Do you have like someone's hat or a sweater or something that reminds you of that person? You're not going around worshiping that object, but it's a reminder, and it brings the thoughts to mind of that person. So I think there's ways to go about it, but I think you're right. You don't want to hit people over the head and say, oh, it's so stinking obvious. Come on, it's right there in Scripture, because that's going to force them away. But I do think in terms of the assumption, where's Mary's body if she wasn't assumed? Because we have the relics of St. Paul, the relics of St. Peter, all the saints in Rome that we have all over the world. I mean, in the early church, the Christians knew the places where the great martyrs were buried and would go there.
Yeah. I think that's a really important point, and that comes down to the real life nitty gritty of, now you're becoming a sleuth, right? You're saying, hey, there is no body, there are no bones, there are no relics. And so for me, that's interesting. And there are all these nuances, the Orthodox and maybe the Eastern Rite, I'm not quite sure of that in the Catholic Church, but, they tend to think that Mary was assumed she didn't die, she fell asleep, that, because she is still alive. But those are arguments you can have with someone who's a theologian. Right. I find it interesting that this notion of her assumption into heaven, which, of course, we're celebrating as a feast day, shows me without any doubt that there's a closeness that Jesus has to Mary. We see it when he's on the cross. He wants her to be taken care of. We see it in her model of faith and obedience, to God in general. To me, that is one of the highest causes and clarion calls for all of us, that this woman, Mary, is a model for faith and obedience in our life, and she can lead us to a place where the yes that she gave to Gabriel's message can also show her willingness to God's plan. And for me, that's an encouragement, because there are times where I hit a bump in the road, I've stepped in a puddle, whatever it is that's happening in life, I'm facing something unknown, and yet I know that I need to accept God's plan for my life. And that may include something that's rough and tough, right?
Yeah. And I think her surrender, her fiat, let it be done to me according to thy word. Not my word, not my will, but your word. It's a constant reminder for us, because I think that surrender has to be every single day. I really hope, and one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this today with you, is that people will take some time, if they're going to the Vigil Mass tomorrow, obviously it's a holy day of obligation, so Mass is required, that they will take some time to pray about the Assumption and maybe look into it a little bit, because we are faithful Catholics trying to live up to the faith, and we go to Mass, but do we really know why the Church declared it a dogma? It is a dogma that was declared in 19... What is it about this Assumption of Mary that the Church sees as so important? And I think that will help us in understanding our faith, but also being able to explain it more clearly to someone who doesn't understand it.
Well, and that comes back to context. For some of us, some people in their worldly life, somebody's an engineer, a doctor, a meteorologist, a radio host, a broadcaster, garbage man, whatever it is. We all have a context, and there are certain things that appeal to us. So the history, just going back to the notion of, what was it, in the 400s, that there was an ecumenical council that had to debate this notion because some believed that there was no way Mary could pass on her DNA as God was God, that her DNA only provided the human half of Jesus. And they had to wrestle with that and said, no, she's the mother of God, so you need to read about this. But for some, they may need to come in a door of history. They may need to follow a door of theologian. Some of us are armchair theologians. Whatever it is that appeals to you, the softer side, the role of being the mother of God and the role of salvation. I so appreciate what you're saying, for us to crack open the Bible and to read it, and to know that if you follow these various lines of Scripture, that the promise to us, is that the Holy Spirit will illumine us, that we don't need to sit there and say, I'm a bit confused sometimes. It may continue to be the case, but every once in a while a light bulb goes off, and then you get directed. It may direct you to your priest. It may direct you to your husband who's a deacon. It may be a friend of mine. But sit and just really look at this idea and spend a little time with it, because in this fast-paced world where we've all got, by research, the attention of about 9 seconds, the attention of a goldfish, I think, is the average now. Just take a minute, calm your life, and study it for a minute and see where that leads you. Where does the Holy Spirit lead you?
And ponder, as Our Lady did, because we see in Scripture, speaking of Scripture, that's what she did so often, pondered these things in her heart. Chuck, you are amazing. I love having you on the program, and I want to thank Deb again for reminding me, get Chuck back on. He's so good.
I need Deb's off air. I need Deb's address so I can send her that. I think it's going to be a new car this time. I'm not sure. I have to check.
Ooh, a new car. She probably flowers.
It's a Hot Wheel. It's a Hot Wheels from the local grocery store.
Or maybe one of those with those little Matchbox cars. Remember those going back way back? Listen, my friend, love you. Have a great feast day today and tomorrow. St. Max today, the Assumption tomorrow. My friend Chuck Gaidica, check out his great work in media ministry and also his wellness coach efforts and his speaking, chuckgaidica.com. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Catholic Connection. Wrapping up a Wednesday, September 3rd. It's live radio, second hour of Catholic Connection, EWTN's Catholic Connection, I might add, on EWTN Radio Extra. It's so funny. Last week when I was on the panel with Annie Mitchell, Anna Banani as I call her, and Matt Swain from the Sunrise Morning Show, all of us, we were talking, along with the wonderful Ace McKay from EWTN Radio, all of us were talking about be prepared, like the Boy Scouts, because things could happen. It's live radio, and maybe something could happen with some audio that you had recorded, or something could happen where a guest may be a no-show. And that's what happened to us today. Now, I'm sure our guest probably just got confused in the times or something, but it's no big deal. When you've done radio as long as I have since DIRT, you always try to be prepared, and you always have to have great producers like Richard and Deborah, who have things, as we say, in the can, really good interviews that we flag them, and interviews that are particularly meaningful. For example, I'm sure you enjoyed hearing Chuck Gaidica talk about our Blessed Mother. He's a wonderful convert to Catholicism. So obviously that interview aired on the eve of the Feast of the Assumption just a few weeks ago. But Chuck was talking about his love for the women in the church, especially, of course, our Holy Mama Mary. So that was a program for today. Tomorrow is going to be very exciting as well. Of course, since it's a Thursday, we will have Cultural Connections with Father Mitch Pacwa. And then I'm so excited because the sculptor behind a brand new statue of Carlo Acutis is going to be joining us live to talk about that. Have a great Wednesday. We'll talk to you, God willing, tomorrow on a Thursday. Ciao from Bella Italia.